For this question, how should I live? Do you have the answer on this one? Don't tell it yet. Do you have? Tell it. But if you have it, we will tell it at the end of the show. So stay tuned. This is for the audience that are listening to us.
I have a couple of ideas. Maybe I thought I would have more answers. Maybe I left with some more questions than some answers. But
no,
definitely. Oh, I'm sorry.
You should have said, yes, I have a process. It's a 3-step process, very simple, You're
going to be saved. You're going to have a meaningful, happy life forever and ever. Just listen to the rest of the podcast.
That's it.
Claudia Bitchen is an artist from San Francisco. She worked on a long-term documentary art project with hospice residents, and this involved interviewing them and also creating a series of 9 life-sized graphite pencil portraits. Now, these really are exceptionally beautiful portraits, and they're worth seeing. And for us, of course, what was fascinating were the life experiences of these residents. In this episode, Claudia shares with us what she learned from these people about herself and end-of-life ruminations. If you would like to support the show or know more about us, sign up for our newsletter at deathhangout.com or click on the button on screen. Now, get ready for this episode, shining a light on your darkness.
Ever since I can remember, I've just been obsessed with this question of how should I live? I've always been very aware of the fact that everything is transient, that our lives will pass, that everything will pass. And I think I have been searching the answer of how to live really since I was maybe 10 years old. And I went and studied philosophy and psychology as my degree. I've been in various Buddhist monasteries and studied meditation. I did my master's in anthropology. And it's always been at this same question of like, how should we live? Like, what is right and wrong? Like, how do we create meaning? Like all of these questions. And so it seemed very normal to me to ask people who are dying. And I sort of had asked so many other people, and I was like, I think not only do I think that they'll have some answers for me, but I've never sat down and talked with somebody who is dying.
Can I stop you just like for 1 second? Because I would like just to put some tension here for the show, So for this question, how should I live? Do you have the answer on this one? Don't tell it yet. Do you have? Tell it. But if you have it, we will tell it at the end of the show. So stay tuned. This is for the audience that are listening to us.
I have a couple of ideas.
Okay, so we will tell them
Brilliant.
To stay at the end of the show. Sorry. Go on. Continue.
Maybe I thought I would have more answers. Maybe I left with some more questions than some answers. But
no,
definitely. Oh, I'm sorry.
You should have said, yes, I have a process. It's a 3-step process, very simple, You're
going to be saved. You're going to have a meaningful, happy life forever and ever. Just listen to the rest of the podcast.
That's it.
And unfortunately, if you can't put it into a blog post with steps, then no one's going to read it. So
it's true. Like a BuzzFeed. We need like a BuzzFeed article. I know.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, people have been trying to do that for a few thousand years with this question, and no one's quite got there. It seemed really normal. Go and ask people who are dying, like, how do they wish they'd lived? Because if anybody's going to have that really have that mirror really held up to them, that's who it's going to be. So that's where this project came from, just a sheer obsession with the question of how to live.
Can you just give us the big lines of a project?
Sure. So Thoughts in Passing is a series of 9 portraits, audio-visual portraits of people who, when I met them, they were hospice patients. Each image is a life-size graphite pencil drawing. I interviewed each person over a number of weeks, and then I recorded all those interviews and transcribed the words from the interviews into the clothing of each portrait. And then each one is accompanied by a 3-minute audio clip from the interviews that we had. So we were really exploring questions of regret, reflections on their life, how they wish they'd lived, what they learned about life, and really what it was like to be confronting death in a very real and very imminent way.
9 people, like any background, like normal people, I guess, I assume that you just randomly met in hospice.
Normal people. That was the most important thing. Just people from a diverse set of experiences. All of them were from the Bay Area, so sort of surrounding San Francisco. So what I did was I approached every single hospice in the Bay Area, and I wrote just complete cold calls. I just called them, wrote to them, and was just like, I'm doing this project. I think that people who are dying are an under-witnessed group of people. I don't think they get to share their story. I think there's a wealth of wisdom for the rest of the world to be able to hear. And hopefully in the process of doing this, we can create a legacy for a number of people who participate in the project. So what they did is they got in contact with their social workers, nurses, chaplains, and they put the word out, explained that this artist wanted to do this project. And I was really lucky because they all got back to me. And they all said, yes, we want to be part of this. So over time, I would get an email from somebody, a complete stranger, and they would be like, I think I have somebody that you should meet. Do you want to come and meet them? So we would have a quick conversation on the phone, and I would go by to their hospital room or their bedroom or their living room or whatever it might be. And we would always have an introductory meeting just to sort of get acquainted and me to explain what the project was. I really just wanted 2 things. The first thing, which is a very practical one, that people needed to be able to talk about their experiences. They couldn't have like too much dementia or be too ill that they were unable to communicate. And the second thing was that they were willing and able to emotionally and psychologically go into these questions around death. And most people are not willing to go there. So I don't think I don't want people to think that these 9 people represent everyone in hospice. These were 9 extremely brave people who allowed a complete stranger into their life while they were dying.
I was looking at the portrait on the website, and it's very fascinating to me because you can see different character, you can see different personality. Can you actually introduce us a little bit more about these 9 people?
So everybody was aged probably from about 50 up to just under 100. I wanted to work with younger people, but I tried, and for various reasons, I wasn't able to. I worked with both men and women. I worked with people who were from a variety of different religious backgrounds, worked with people from a variety of races, a variety of different sexualities, and that was really key to me. And I really wanted to capture some of the essence of the diversity of San Francisco. And because I felt that from that you would get a whole different range of stories, a whole different range of perspectives. But maybe if we were able to find any common themes, you would be able to show in a small way that was a theme that really transcended a lot of those things. Obviously, they're all from California. So that, I don't want to suggest these are like universal claims, but at least it was across a lot of different diverse people.
You interview these people, you spent 2 years with them. So tell us, what did you learn from all this?
So there's 2 things. There's 2 really important themes that came out for me. So I'll touch on both of them. So the first one was that at first I had no idea. I was like, this is so disparate. What everybody's saying to me is so disparate. Everybody found different things. Everybody came to different conclusions. I have no idea what they all have in common. And then as I sat with it, and it was really months and months had gone by, and it suddenly dawned on me that what everybody had in common was not only the things that they decided to talk about, but the things that they decided not to talk about. So the things that were really important to people were the ways in which they had really transcended themselves, the ways in which they had given of themselves to the world. And that could mean in any way, whether it was the ways in which they had given themselves through their art form, or through their children, or through their community and their church, or through the trucks that one guy like lovingly cared for and connected with the world outside of himself, or the walks in nature. It was everything that people were passionate about, and the things that gave them meaning were the ways in which they participated in the world and the ways in which they gave of themselves. And then I found the complete opposite to be true, that the things that nobody wanted to talk about or just had no consequence were the things that they had consumed, the money they had made, the status they had achieved. And what I began to see that what all of those things had in common were the things that we take into ourselves. And I realized that there were these two themes that stand in perfect opposition to one another. I realized that the meaningful life is the life that gives, and you can give in so many different ways. And there is no one way. There's no one way to live that, but you have to give. You have to find what it is of yourself that you want to give, and you have to give it. And that is the meaningful life. That was one of the biggest conclusions for me. The other conclusion is maybe was more of a difficult one to grapple with, I think, because I went into this project expecting to find so much wisdom, expecting to find people undergo like a major psychological shift as they confronted their death. And I was expecting to kind of learn all of these lessons and have these people as my teachers. And I think I went into it very naively. And I think the reality is that most people don't have this huge transformative sort of revelatory experience. They continue to be themselves. We're not on this sort of upward path towards some sort of ideal enlightened state. Instead, life is this sort of wave. We have these moments of up and these moments of down and these moments of up and these moments of down, and then suddenly it's over. And we're not really progressing towards something. We're just living. And I think that was quite a shocking, sad feeling at first, that sort of realization that we die as ourselves. We're not really going anywhere. But then it became quite liberating, because I realized that if we're not really going anywhere, there isn't this upward trajectory, then really the task of liberation becomes being able to accept that wave and accept who you are. And if we can, love ourselves for who we are.
I think there was a quote in there for, is it Osamu? Which I thought was just something that just really struck me. It was like, when you try and work and get ahead, you give up time. In terms of where he was coming from with that, could you just elaborate on that a bit more?
Yeah, so for Osamu in particular, just a little bit of background there. His family were originally from Japan. He was born in California. He actually spent a number of years in the internment camps for the Japanese during the war. So he lost a lot of his education that he should have had. He lost it in the camps in California. And he really talked a lot about his struggle of being an immigrant during a time where there was so much discrimination against his community of people. And so one of the other things he talks about in his interview is how he really wanted to be a creator, and he had to settle for being a worker instead and just get by so he could feed his children and sort of get his family through. But he had to give up his passion of creation, which was for him. He wanted to be an architect, and instead he became a worker for somebody else.
Here's an extract of Osamu's interview that Claudia has recorded.
Everything is work first, pleasure after if there's time. I felt that I should help the family out as much as I can economically. I don't believe I missed too many deadlines. We were probably close to 100%. When you try and work and get ahead, you give up time. Leave just very, very few hours in a week to enjoy people, education, religion. I wish I can back off on how much work I did. I try to go back, make a more creative mind so I can fully enjoy what's available. There's so much the world has to offer. I just barely skimmed it.
He always was struggling with this balance of time versus money, and I think he didn't have much freedom there to be able to take more time because he had so many people that he needed to care for.
It goes back to what you were saying earlier about the giving. I think this is a big question because a lot of the things that come up when we have these conversations about death, and there's lots of stuff out there about following your passion and living in the moment and stuff. But that's the reality that the majority of people are in. It's that balance between how do we do that, and we need the money as well to live. So yeah. I suppose, did you get any other insights from all the people you spoke to on maybe an approach to that, or ways they look at it now when they're looking back?
I think one of the big myths of our culture is that we believe that you have to combine your work with your passion, and I think it's this impossible setup. And to make it clear to anybody who listens to this, being an artist is not my full-time job. I mean, in case you hadn't realized, you can't make much money from drawing dying people.
Oh.
It wasn't a big commercial project by any means. So I actually spent 20 hours a week working in recruiting for a tech company, because that was the only way that I found that I could balance that, being able to participate in the market and make money, but have as much time as I possibly could to be able to do everything that I loved. This myth for me really emerged that I don't think that your career has to be the thing that you're passionate about. Like, we need to work. We need to participate in the market in some way to make enough money to get by. And I think where you can often find meaning, and where most people find meaning, is not in their work. It's in the more simple things in life that everybody has access to, you know, whether that's going out into nature or just watching their child play, or being able to be held by another human being. And I think it's important to sort of shift our attitude away from, if my work isn't meaningful, I've somehow failed.
That simplicity, and it's seeing what's in front of you as well. I think it's that whole, when the focus is on work too much, even on the negative side, then it blinds us to what's actually is there.
There's something in me when you said this upper spiral, or this development of ours, because we in this society is almost, we have been educated this way. We need to grow, we need to develop, we need to, you know, become someone or whatever. And when you said we are not going anywhere, you know, it's up and down, and we are not going this way, you know, there's something, I just noticed some resistance to accept that in me. There's something which is very, is it like this, you know, basically whatever you do is just like, doesn't matter, you'll stay at this level somehow. So me, it's very, very hard actually to accept that. And you mentioned you were sad. So can you elaborate on this one? Because right now I'm refusing to understand that, by the way. You know, I'm just saying that, you know, I'm just like, no, it's wrong.
I think it's about flipping the idea of progress on its head, right? And again, it's a sort of another cultural myth and a cultural metaphor, that we think that the only way to understand progress is to understand it the same way that we do think of like economic progress, right? This sort of upward trajectory. And actually, what if you think of progress as being able to more clearly and fluidly and contentedly move with that flow of your life? And right now, I know most people don't, and I certainly don't all the time, like move with that flow. And maybe if we sort of flip that metaphor in its head and think of progress as the ability to live in line with that movement of life, maybe we think very differently about progress. It's not that there isn't anything to achieve. I think that's an incredibly difficult thing to achieve, much harder than perhaps, you know, career success and economic success.
The way I'm hearing you say that, it's like it's an acceptance of where we are in each moment, and rather than measuring it against this sort of linear line that's going up, it's just reassessing that success based on how we are in each moment.
You know, I heard this, I'm going to misquote the quote that I heard on happiness, but it was something like, you know, happiness isn't getting what you desire or getting what you want. Happiness is wanting what you already have. And I think that's really kind of getting at this same idea of, can you fall in love with the moments that you have, and can you sort of really be in the moments that you have? And for me, if you can, like, that is going to be what determines your success as a human being, not the things that you've achieved and you've gained and you've proven to the world that you're capable of doing. It's not that there isn't any progress, it's just that progress looks like a very different thing.
And I'm okay with that, actually, because to me there's an opening almost. No, there's a progress with what you said, because there's an acceptance. And acceptance, it's almost like growing as well. Well, developing. I don't know. There's something, to me, there's
Definitely
movement. There's movement, you know, inside that.
Yes, it's definitely not a static thing. I mean, this project fundamentally changed me. It changed my ability to be happy. It changed my ability to sort of be in the moment and to love the people around me. If you're not moved by the project and you're not moved to sort of live differently, then, you know, it hasn't really kind of cut to the core. So it certainly isn't that there isn't like development or growth. It's just that growth doesn't necessarily look like you're just moving upwards towards something.
If I say grow, of course you see that, there's this trend of going up, but it's not like that. To me, it's more like when you say we have to give, that's the meaning of life or something like that. This is what they say. In order to be happy or fulfilled or meaningful, you have to give to yourself. That's to reach that. To me, there's this sense of expansiveness. We need to let go of this ego of ours and become like more open to stuff. I guess. So
I think you put it perfectly. Yeah. Exactly.
There was one thing that I think it was Ina said, and she was saying she had lots of regrets that she didn't think she did much for herself, didn't accomplish very much with life, had lots of opportunities. So this is the place I keep going in all these conversations, and that's what I'm trying to discover from having all these conversations we're having. It's that balance, isn't it? So it's accepting where you are, but as I said, and giving. It's not about being static, and it's not about giving at the expense of yourself all the time either. And that's what I was getting from what Ina was saying.
Ina's a really good example. Ina's a really good example where initially I was like, does she not fit into this theory? Because Ina is the ultimate giver. And a little bit of background on Ina. She was born, I think she was born in the 20s, beautiful lady, and she was a nurse her whole life, and she cared for all of her family, and she sort of has this line that suddenly I looked around and I realized that all the people I'd cared for throughout all of my life had died, and there was no one really left to sort of care for me. She had been the ultimate giver, right?
Yeah.
And yet it hadn't really brought her happiness. And I think what's interesting to think about her is so much of that burden, I hate to say it's the burden of being a woman, and a burden of being a woman, particularly in that generation where the expectation of you is to just give endlessly, sort of at the expense of maybe what your own wants and needs were. It's maybe a different type of giving when there's like a pressure to give of yourself in a certain way and not be able to kind of lead your own life at the same time.
Here's an extract of Ina's interview that Claudia has recorded.
I have lots of regrets. I don't think I did much for myself. I don't accomplish very much in my life. I had lots of opportunities. I had a chance to have a job as a nurse traveling all over the world, and I turned it down because I had to take care of my mom and dad. But most of the things you plan don't come true. At least it didn't for me. When you're young, you think everything should go your way, I think. Go to a dance and dance all night and all that stuff. And you think that's part of your life. But then it doesn't last for long. It's not a forever thing. You have a different opinion of things after you get older. Mostly, if you want to write a thick book, you could write what I didn't do that I should have done, but I didn't do it, no matter what it was. I drew a horse when I was in high school, and I never could put a tail on it. And I think it's still wandering around the family somewhere with this horse with no tail. And I couldn't do it. I tried and tried. I traced them and tried all different tails. Never came out right. Maybe he was born to be without a tail. I don't know.
She breaks my heart, that one, every time. I've seen these hundreds of times and I cry every time with her.
There's a parallel to me that comes into mind is, the regrets of the dying that Bronnie Ware mentioned. Maybe, there's these top five regrets of the dying, where the first one is, I believe, is I wish I would have lived the life I wanted and not what the others wanted for me to live. And it's almost like this, there's this pressure that we have from our education, environment, society, culture to do something, to fit in a perfect job, I guess. And not listening to us, not listening to ourselves from what we really wanted. I think this is where the problem comes in. So my question is, so this top five regrets of the dying, is it like what you experience, when you kind of talked with your 9 person?
Yeah, I'm struggling to remember what all 5 of them are right now, but I've read them. I have read them many times. It was one of the early things that I read when I was getting started with the project. But I think they are, yeah, I wish I had been more myself. I wish I had been able to sort of love more deeply. I wish I had spent less time in the office, I think was the first one, which everybody, I mean, at least all of the men, all of the men said. And I say all of the men said, I was, interviewing people who, you have to put them within the context of the generations they were in, like where they were all the breadwinners of their family and things like that. But I certainly saw all of those to be true. And I think if you look at them and break them down, they're all coming back to these similar themes that we're talking about right now.
I think the last one or the 5th one, I can't remember which one it was actually, but it was that I wish I'd allowed myself to be happy.
Yeah.
It was actually just making the choice to be happy came back. And just what I get from everything that you're saying, Claudia, here is it's like about the giving piece, and it's that whole thing. It's we do this sort of polarizing thing that, well, if I give to others, I can't give to myself, as opposed to saying, well, hang on a minute, if by giving to others I give to myself through the act, then that's the way to hit both. So it comes back to your values, it comes back to what's important, who's important, how you interact with those. And we don't have to. I think it always becomes a polarized thing, rather than it being, well, if you're living your life the way you want to, and all those things are important, like loving people, sort of caring for people, if those are important and you're doing it that way, as opposed to it being, as you said about Ina and the where her background, there was more of that expectation, and that fits in what Olivier was just saying about doing what people say. It's about understanding what you want. I mean, would that make sense from the conversations you've had with people?
Yes, absolutely. I think it has to be in line with what you desire to give. But I think, the ways in which, when we've sort of touched on this, the ways in which we are told to sort of give of ourselves are much more rooted in how we can sort of give of our time in order to take more from the world around us. And I think it's sort of flipping that on its head, and it's this sort of the inherent, the irony that you get more from giving more. In fact, when I got married last summer, and my grandmother came up to me and she was like, sweetie, she's like, the only love you get to keep is the love that you give away. And it really stuck with me, because that was really, that was what came from this project time and time again. And ultimately, you're going to die. We're all going to die. We don't get to keep any of it. And I think there's this, it's very intimately tied up with the sort of death denial of capitalist society, which the more you look at it, the more acutely aware I think you'll probably become of it, that capitalism is sort of built on this, is built on this mission to get people to accumulate more and more and more stuff. And there's something quite protective about that. There's something quite death denying about that if you just accumulate enough stuff, you'll somehow be protected from the realities of life when you can't take any of it with you, So it's part of a much bigger, deeper societal problem, I think.
We are coming to the end of the show, and we promise something to our audience, is basically the 3 steps process to live a more magnificent life.
No pressure.
No pressure, no. But, what if we don't like advices, by the way? We don't like to give advice ourselves. So I wouldn't say give advice, but how should we live, a better life or meaningful life according to you?
So 3 steps, but no advice.
Well, we'll do whatever you want.
What are the 3 biggest lessons you've got from all of this?
No, 3. You could have 1 if you want. That's okay.
For me, what it really taught me to do is to go boldly into the darkest, scariest crevices of your life. Take a torch and shine the light and be as loving and kind and as compassionate as you can into the darkness that normally we try and avoid. And I think that's the only way that we'll be able to live a more expansive, light-filled life, by confronting the darkness.
Again, please support the show by signing up at guesthangout.com.